while using the insulin, the patient has to be hospitalized and the blood glucose is monitored every 4 to 6 hourly. And as per their reading, we inject the drug. Okay, that is what is sliding scale. In MTS, what we generally do is we measure the blood glucose level of the patient. If it is coming like 151 to 200, then we inject 4 unit of insulin, a regular insulin, that is a short acting insulin. Okay, got it? If it is less than 151 or less than 150, insulin is not required. So 151 to 200, we give 4 units. Okay, am I audible to you all?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so 151 to 204 unit. After that, on increase of 50 reading by 50 numbers, the unit should be increased by 2. That is, if the reading is 151 to 200, we give 4. 200 to 250, we give 6. That means increase 2. Okay, and 251 to 300, if it is, then we give 8 unit, and 300 to 350, we give 10 unit. And if it is more than 350, then we go for the insulin drip, the infusion. Okay, so this is what is the sliding scale. Measuring the blood glucose concentration, we will give the insulin. Okay, and after 24 hours, okay, we will see how what is the consumption of 24 the insulin in 24 hours. Okay, and then that all together 24 hours insulin requirement or use, we divide into two. 2/3 in the morning and one third in the evening with the intermediate dose. So that is how we give in type 1 diabetes mellitus. Okay, so the other uses of insulin, as last time we said that in type 2 diabetes mellitus, generally we prefer the oral anti-diabetic drug. But in special cases of type 2 diabetes mellitus, that is in case of failure of oral anti-diabetic drug or the patient is very underweight, in that case we use insulin even in case of type 2 diabetes mellitus patient. Hello, am I audible to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, is my slides still visible to you?
No, sir.
No, because again there was power cut for some time. Now is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so in special cases of type 2 diabetes mellitus, we give insulin. In other cases, the oral anti-diabetic drugs are used. Last time we discussed, and in non-diabetic use, there is non-diabetic use of insulin also. An important interaction in last class I have said to find it out. Okay, why beta blocker, especially non-specific, are contraindicated in diabetes mellitus? Okay, anyone? Can you please answer this questions?
Marks the hypoglycemic effect.
To mask what happens? Prasiddhi. Prasiddhi Acharya, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Why beta blockers non-specific are contraindicated in diabetes mellitus? Patient receiving insulin.
Sir, if the hypoglycemic effect is seen, then the beta blocker, it covers up the hypoglycemic effect.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Anything else?
Sir, beta acts on pancreatic cells and decreases the release
Sorry,
of
who is there?
insulin.
Who is that?
Abhiraz Yadav, sir.
I'm not very clearly listening to your voice. Can
Sir,
you?
it also acts on pancreatic cells and decreases the release of insulin in hypoglycemic condition.
Okay, now what happens is in patient, diabetes patient receiving insulin, there is a chance of hypoglycemia. Okay, got it? There is a chance of hypoglycemia, and when there is hypoglycemia, there are two things which occur in our body. Okay, number one is there will be a symptoms of hypoglycemia. I have already said the first symptoms to appear is sympathetic symptoms, and they are mediated generally by beta 1 and beta 2 receptor. Okay, so symptoms will be there. Got it? Which is shown through beta 1 and beta 2 receptor, number one. Number two, what does body do is it will increase the adrenaline release, and that adrenaline will try to increase the blood glucose. Okay, the correction, and that correction is being facilitated by the beta 2 receptor. Got it? So if you block use this beta blocker non-specific in these patients, when there is hypoglycemia, the beta 1 and beta 2 receptor will be blocked. So what will happen? The symptoms will be masked, the symptoms will not be seen, and the next is the adrenaline which is released to correct the hypoglycemia cannot do the work because it does the work through beta 2 receptor present in liver. So that is why there will be masking of a symptoms of hypoglycemia. Okay, masking the symptoms are shown by beta 1 and beta 2, so that is why there will be masking of symptoms, and it delays the recovery. Okay, so there will be prolonged hypoglycemia. The patient may not know that there was hypoglycemia and may land up with a complication or death may happen. Okay, the hypoglycemic coma. Got it? So this masking of symptoms is due to beta 1 and beta 2 receptors. Okay, and this delay recovery is generally with beta 2. So if you use selective beta receptor, then there will be masking of symptoms, but that will not delay the recovery. Okay, so the selective beta blocker are a little bit good, or you can say non-selective is bad, and the selective is bad and non-selective is very bad. Okay, both are not good to give, but the worsening of the symptoms will be more common with non-specific. So that is why the non-specific is more dangerous. Even specific is also not very safer. Okay, or say cardioselective beta blocker. So generally in diabetes mellitus patient receiving insulin, we have to try to avoid the beta blocker, and if you have to use, there is no other and there is a compelling reason to give beta blocker, then you have to choose a cardioselective. Okay, got it? So this is what we discussed in last class, and in last class I have given you this MCQ. Okay, question number 1. What is the correct option?
Hyperkalemia.
Sorry? What is the correct option? Insulin causes all of the following except.
Hyperkalemia.
So which is
Hyperkalemia.
not being caused by insulin? Yes?
Hyperkalemia.
Sorry? Suraj, Acharya Suraj. Are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
What is the correct answer for question number 1? What is the correct option?
Sir.
Yes? So in last class, I have given you the assignment, isn't it? You don't know the answer? Suraj?
Sir, hyperkalemia.
Yes?
Hyperkalemia.
Yes, hyperkalemia. Because insulin causes hypokalemia, not hyperkalemia. And next, who is there? Suman Adhikari. Are you there? Suman? No? Suman is absent? Shreya Agrawal.
Yes, sir.
Okay. What is the correct answer? Option number 2, MCQ.
Glulysin.
Sorry?
So I think D.
All of the following preparation of insulin are rapid and short acting except
I think D.
D. No. Which one is the longest acting? Tell me.
Sorry.
Insulin glargine. So now see, I'm emphasizing on that glargine is the longest acting Piclex insulin then. Okay.
Yes, yes.
So option C is the correct answer. Now who is there? The other one. Sahamat Ahmad. Are you there? Sahamat. Sisir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, what is the correct answer of MCQ question number 3? Which of the following is not used for the treatment of insulin-induced hypoglycemia? Yes?
Adrenaline.
Yes. Good. Adrenaline we generally don't use. And anyone what is the correct answer to question number 4? Adverse effect of insulin include all of the following except?
Hyperglycemia.
Yes, very easy question. Hyperglycemia. It decreases, it causes hypoglycemia. So the insulin never cause hyperglycemia. Okay, so very easy option. So this B is the correct answer for MCQs number 4. So SAQ, please do it. Okay. So insulin preparation, classify and enumerate, and briefly write briefly on adverse effect of insulin and insulin glargine. Okay. So this is what we discussed in last class. Okay. Now today we will start the anti-diabetic drugs. Okay, oral anti-diabetic drug. So the drug which we discussed, they were parenteral 1. Okay, is the slide visible to you all?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So the drugs which are used orally, which is used in diabetes, so that is why the drugs oral anti-diabetic drug. In last class only I have said, rather than using the term oral hypoglycemic drug, the better to use oral anti-diabetic drug, because all the anti-diabetic drug, they do not cause hypoglycemia as side effects. Okay, so what are the drugs that doesn't cause hypoglycemia? Okay, so that could be an important question for your MCQs. So with this classes, you will come to know the answer to that question. So we have in oral anti-diabetic drug, we have the drug which enhance insulin secretion. That means that increases the insulin secretion. I have already said in type 2 diabetes, oral anti-diabetic drug, they are most commonly used in type 2 diabetes mellitus, and in type 2 diabetes mellitus, the insulin is produced, isn't it? There is production of insulin, but that is not sufficient, okay, for sufficient to cater the need of the body, okay. So that is why you can increase this insulin, and we have a drug which enhance the insulin secretion. This enhancement could be done by potassium ATPase channel blocker, okay. With animation we have explained the potassium channel which is blocked, and then there will be depolarization and calcium enters, okay. So that channel blockers. So one important group of drug is sulfonylurea. We have in sulfonylurea, we have first generation sulfonylurea, tolbutamide, and second generation sulfonylurea, glibenclamide, glipizide, gliclazide, glimepiride, etc. So out of this, the first generation nowadays not very commonly used one, okay. The second generation, glibenclamide are also not commonly preferred nowadays, but glipizide, gliclazide, glimepiride, etc. all those are very important, very commonly used anti-diabetic drug, okay. So sulfonylurea. The other group is meglitinide, okay, which is ripaglinide and natiglinide. It also act by the same mechanism, that is potassium channel blockers, okay. And we have incretins, which increase the activity of incretin. We have glucagon-like peptide 1, that is GLP-1 receptor agonist, okay. Even though this is being categorized as oral anti-diabetic drug, but these drugs are given by injection, and this is the drug which are under clinical trial, okay. Not very commonly used. Even in India, major cities, these drugs are being used, and this is used once in a week, okay, something like that. So this is one drug. And similarly, dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitor, that is DPP4 inhibitor, okay. So this is nowadays very commonly used one, and this is given orally, okay. This is only the drug which is given injectable, even though it has been classified in oral anti-diabetic drug. But this DPP4 inhibitors, sitagliptin, linagliptin, saxagliptin, there are other gliptins also, okay, which are nowadays slowly getting popularity, okay. This is some, you can say, a recently added drug which is gaining popularity. So this is the other drug. Similarly, we have the drug which overcome the insulin resistance, okay. Insulin resistant, especially in obese patient, there is insulin resistance. So that is why the insulin requirement is more in type 2 diabetes mellitus. Very popular drug in this is biguanide, and in that we have metformin. Metformin is one of the most commonly used oral anti-diabetic drug, okay. So you have to know why metformin is most commonly used in type 2 diabetes mellitus, okay. Nowadays, when you diagnose diabetes mellitus, type 2 diabetes mellitus, the first and foremost drug to be given is metformin. Metformin is very preferred, okay. Until unless there is contraindication, all of the patients are kept on metformin. There is lot of advantages of metformin, and we will be talking about that, okay. So that is why metformin, since it is very commonly used one, that is why it is very important, okay, clinically as well as for pharmacology exam point of view. So we will be talking about metformin, and please underline this drug. You have to know this drug very nicely. Even sometime you have to know this, the detail of about this drug. Very important group of drug, okay. Similarly, we have thiazolidinediones. Thiazolidinedione, we have rosiglitazone and pioglitazone. Rosiglitazone is now recently banned even in India, Nepal, okay. Few years back it was some of the commonly used, but rosiglitazone, it was found that the elderly people, especially in women, there was fracture, tendency of fracture was increased, so that is why it has been banned. And now the people are suspecting whether this pioglitazone, which belong to the same group, also has that type of side effect or not. So that is why there is a lot of suspicion, and that is why not very commonly used nowadays, okay, because of that tendency, okay. It has been banned, and so that is why they are having doubt about that side effect, okay. And we have miscellaneous anti-diabetic drug, and we have alpha glucosidase inhibitor, okay. Alpha glucosidase inhibitor, acarbose, voglibose, these are also commonly used drug, especially as an adjuvant or to combine, okay, with the main drug. Amylin analog, okay, again a recently added one. And we have sodium glucose co-transport 2, SGLT2 inhibitor, which is also a recently added, and nowadays it is used. It has like promising potential. So, but since it is a newer drug, so the physician, they are not relying, they are not very confident about this. So even though it is there, and then there are a lot of researches are going on about this drug also, but still now it has not been added as a guideline in some of the guidelines. In among all these drugs, the most commonly preferred, which is added in a guideline, and when you see the world-class guideline for the treatment of diabetes mellitus, you will find metformin at the top, okay, and then comes this sulfonyl urea, okay, the sulfonyl urea group of drug. So these are some of the very, very important from examination point of view, okay, got it? So that is there. Now let us go in a sequence, okay. It doesn't mean that the drug which we will discuss earlier are more important. I have already said metformin is very important, then comes the sulfonyl urea, then the other one, okay. By the end of this class for diabetes mellitus, the drug of diabetes mellitus, you will come to know that which drug is very important and which else. So let us start the drug one by one. Let us start with sulfonyl urea. Sulfonyl urea, it is insulin secretagogue, that is, it facilitates the insulin secretion, secretagogue, okay. And for the action, it requires at least 30% functional beta cells, okay. So what does it require? The 30% functional beta cell, okay. So Kushal Singh Basnet. Kushal Singh Basnet, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you tell me, just guess, can we use this sulfonyl urea in type 1 diabetes mellitus?
No, sir.
Yes?
No, we cannot use, sir.
Why?
Because
Yes.
there is deficient of like everything. Beta cells.
Sorry? Deficient of what?
Deficient of beta cells. There will be deficiency of beta cell.
Okay, yes. Beta cells are destroyed in type 1 diabetes mellitus. That is, there is no functional beta cell. That is why now for the action of sulfonyl urea, you require at least 30% functional beta cell. So that is why sulfonyl urea could not be used. It is never used in type 1 diabetes mellitus. It cannot be, okay. Now, how does it act? Mechanism of action. Okay, same diagram again I will be using. Now what happens, we have discussed already that glucose, when the glucose level in the blood increases, the glucose is transported into the beta cell of pancreas with the help of GLUT transport. and by metabolism of this glucose it is converted to ATP, and this ATP closes the potassium channel, which depolarizes raises the beta cells, and this depolarization causes opening of calcium ion, and this calcium ion will cause exocytosis and release of insulin. So that is why when glucose level increases, the insulin release is also increased, isn't it? Now what happens, the sulfonylurea, what does it do is, it directly, sulfonylurea has the receptor somewhere in this potassium channel, and this sulfonylurea directly go and bind to this receptor and directly close the potassium channel. Okay, so this potassium channel will be closed regardless of insulin, whatever be the concentration. We don't the sulfonylurea will not see. Okay, directly go and close the this potassium ion channel, and it becomes depolarized, and calcium enters and insulin is released. So there is no requirement of glucose. So that is why, how does this sulfonylurea act? It increases insulin secretion. That is why it is said insulin secretagogue. It secretes the insulin. Okay, so it increase the insulin secretion by acting on sulfonylurea receptor at ATP sensitive potassium channel, in this channel. Okay, this is ATP sensitive potassium channel. Okay, it directly go and bind here and closes the potassium channel and depolarizes this beta cell, and this depolarized beta cell causes calcium channel to open, calcium enters, and insulin is released. Okay, so this is the main mechanism of sulfonylurea. Okay, got it? Understood? Can I move ahead? Or if you have any doubt, you can ask. Yes? Can I go ahead?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Now the other mechanism, this is the main mechanism, and when you use this sulfonylurea for long period of time, what will happen? It sensitizes the target tissue to action of insulin. Okay, so the target tissue means you're in skeletal, in say liver, there are the tissues where insulin act, isn't it? So they are being sensitized by this. Now pharmacokinetics, this sulfonylurea is well absorbed orally. It is high plasma protein bound, so that is why even the sulfonylurea, which has short half-life, also act for a long period of time. That is why most of the sulfonylurea, they are given once in a day. Okay, so and these sulfonylurea, some they produce active metabolite in liver and eliminated from the kidney, and a single daily dose is sufficient even in short T-half. Okay, so T-half is not the guiding factor for the frequency of administration. Okay. Now adverse effect of sulfonylurea, very important. Okay, so this increases insulin release. Okay, it stimulates insulin release, so that is why when insulin will be there is a chance of what? Hypoglycemia or hyperglycemia?
Hypoglycemia.
Sorry?
Hypoglycemia.
Yes, very good. There is a chance of hypoglycemia, the glucose level. So that is one important side effect of sulfonylurea. And when there is hypoglycemia, again the satiety center in our brain will be stimulated. There will be more hunger will be developed. And next, one more thing is the insulin. What type of hormone is insulin? Anabolic or catabolic?
Anabolic.
Anabolic. So that is why the insulin try to increase the body weight. So sulfonylurea what is the side effect or adverse effect? If someone asks, then the most important adverse effect is, number one is hypoglycemia. Number two, you can say it may increase the body weight also. Okay, so these side effects are very less with sulfonylurea, just 3 to 7%, and the most common side effect is hypoglycemia. And there is weight gain. Why? Because of stimulation of satiety center, as well as your anabolic activity of insulin. Okay, so that is why there is weight gain. There could be nausea, vomiting, flatulence, and diarrhea. They are very less common. The most important or the common side effect is hypoglycemia and weight gain. So you have to educate or aware your patient about the symptoms of hypoglycemia and what to do if hypoglycemia occur. Okay, so what has to be done if hypoglycemia occurs? Vijay?
Chocolate, sir. Sir, he can be given a chocolate.
Sorry?
He can eat a chocolate.
Okay, so you have to ask your patient to take the chocolate, but how the patient will know that the patient is having hypoglycemia?
There will be excessive sweating.
Sorry?
There will be excessive sweating and fainting, nausea.
Palpitation, tremor, okay?
Yes.
So the heart rate will increase. So those are the symptoms. So you have to make aware the patient about the hypoglycemia and suggest, okay? Apart from that, there could be hypersensitivity, the allergic reactions. Now this sulfonylurea, what happened is, all sulfonylurea is almost similar. So that is why individual sulfonylurea, you don't have to remember much. Okay, the side effect, the your mechanism of action is almost similar. Even the use is same. What is the use of sulfonylurea? Sulfonylurea, where it is used?
Type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes.
Yes, Nitish Kumar. Nitish Kumar, in which case we use sulfonylurea?
So in type 2 diabetes.
Yes, very good. Type 2 diabetes mellitus. You cannot use in type 1 diabetes mellitus, isn't it? Okay, because you require 30% functional beta cells. So how do they differ is, the individual compound differ in potency. Potency means how much does drug you have to take. That means some you may have to take 1 milligram, 2 milligram, or some of the drug is required to be taken 40 milligram. So which one is more potent, the drug which is taken 1 milligram or 40 milligram?
1 milligram.
1 milligram is more potent. So in potency they differ. Some are more potent, some are less. That is not very clinically important one. And the cost. Okay, potency, duration of action, and a cost. These are the three differentiating factor among the sulfonylurea. Otherwise, sulfonylurea all are same. Now, glicazide, glipizide have few side effects. Okay, so that is why nowadays glicazide and glipizide are more preferred. Glibenclamide, okay, it has very long name, so it has a long duration of action. Okay, and there is a more chance of severe hypoglycemia. So that is why glibenclamide is avoided in elderly. Nowadays, not very commonly used this glibenclamide. The most commonly used sulfonylurea is glicazide, glipizide, and other. Glibenclamide we don't generally prefer because it has a chance of more hypoglycemia. And remember, longer the duration of action, the chances of hypoglycemia is more. Okay. Now let us talk about meglitinide. Okay, it is again a insulin secretagogue. It also secrete the insulin. Okay, stimulate the beta cell for the secretion of the insulin. So it include ripaglinide and natiglinide. So this meglitinide, it is rapidly and short acting. Okay, very short acting and rapid. So it releases insulin in same as that of sulfonylurea, same mechanism. It acts on the ATP sensitive potassium channel and closes, okay, and causes depolarization, and that depolarization causes entry of calcium, okay. So that is the main mechanism or same mechanism, and they are absorbed very fast, so that is why it is fast acting, rapidly acting, and they are rapidly metabolizing, so that is why it is a short acting. So fast and short acting, if you want a faster and shorter action, okay, then meglitidenide could be used, but since they are rapidly acting and short, they have low risk of serious hypoglycemia, okay, and they may cause a less weight gain than SU means sulfonylurea. Okay, SU means sulfonylurea. When you compare with meglitidenide and sulfonylurea, even though both they act by the same mechanism, okay, but this meglitidenide has a chances of less weight gain, okay. And meglitidenide it is taken immediately before meal to control the postprandial hyperglycemia in type 2 diabetes. Postprandial means after taking a meal, isn't it? You know, in diagnosis of diabetes mellitus, okay, or even for monitoring of the treatment of diabetes mellitus, we do the two tests. One we say fasting, next one is PP. PP means postprandial. So fasting means we take with in empty stomach, and PP means after taking the meals 2 hours after taking the meal, okay. If someone is having, okay, the fasting is okay, but PP is in higher side, or the reading of postprandial hyper glucose level is very high, in that case it could be preferred one, okay. And it is generally made for meglitidenide. They are preferred to supplement metformin or long-acting insulin. They are not used as say as a single drug, okay. And I think at the last or second last of this chapter, the second last lecture of this chapter, we will be talking about the guideline of treatment of diabetes mellitus. In that guideline, you will be more clear, okay, which drug to be approached and where is this meglitidenide or say the other drugs they belong to. I have already mentioned metformin is okay. Sorry for interruption. Again, there was a power cut. Okay. Now, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we were talking about this meglitidenide, okay, which has similar action, but it is not a drug which is preferred or it is used singly as a main drug, okay. Now let us go to incretins, okay. It is again a newer addition, incretins, they increase glucagon-like peptide, GLP, okay, glucagon-like peptide activity. And what incretin does is it induces insulin release, it inhibits glucagon release, okay, and slow the gastric emptying and suppresses the appetite. So since it induces the insulin release, so incretin, okay, like peptide or increasing in incretin, the drugs which increase the incretin level are beneficial in diabetes mellitus, and we are using. So in incretin, we have like this incretin, glucagon-like peptide, okay, this incretin which increases the glucagon-like peptide, it is rapidly degraded by the enzyme dipeptidyl peptidase, DPP, okay. So what you can do is either you can use a drug which acts similar to GLP, okay, one option to increase the incretin activity. One, either you facilitate the or use a drug which act like GLP, that is what we say GLP agonist, or what we can do is we can inhibit this enzyme dipeptidase 4, okay, dipeptidyl peptidase 4, DPP4 enzyme. If you inhibit, then degradation of GLP will not happen. So GLP will be there in our body for a long period of time, and that will cause increase in insulin release, okay. So we have both these, okay. Number one is GLP receptor agonist, okay, we have that, and it is available in injection form, and they act directly on the receptor with without degradation by the DPP, okay, they are not degraded by DPP4, so it will remain in our body and will act for a long period of time. So that is what one drug we have. And next one, DPP4 antagonist. Now these antagonists like sitagliptin, linagliptin, teneligliptin, these are the drugs which is slowly gaining the popularity in diabetes mellitus, okay. So what they do is those sitagliptin, linagliptin, they antagonize this DPP4 enzyme, and since it block this, GLP will not be degraded and GLP will facilitate induce insulin release. So that is how it acts. So, and this is now it is used as an add-on therapy, okay, not as a main drug in diabetes mellitus, but in addition to metformin or in addition to sulfonylurea or something, we are using as an add-on therapy in type 2 diabetes mellitus, okay. Any doubt? Have you understood? Sonam. Sonam, are you there? Rustam.
Yes, sir.
Okay, have you understood?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you tell me the difference between incretin and DPP4 antagonist? The GLP agonist and DPP4 antagonist? Which one is directly acting, which one is indirectly acting? Yes, Rustam?
Sir, sir, the direct acting is sir, the direct acting is GLP.
GLP agonist, okay. And how does that those sitagliptin, linagliptin, they act? How do the DPP4 inhibitor act?
Sir, DPP4 inhibitors act indirectly.
How does it do? What does it do?
Sir, by inhibiting the destruction of
Of what? Destruction of what?
sort of GLP.
Okay, then what will happen? When GLP will not be destroyed, then?
Sir, then insulin will be increased.
Okay, so that is how it acts. Now let us talk about metformin. I think we will just start metformin today, and in next class we will continue. And I have been telling you that metformin is very important drug for diabetes mellitus. Now metformin, what you have to understand is it is a euglycemic drug. Okay, Rustam, what do you mean by euglycemic?
Sir, euglycemic means sir.
Have you heard about euphoria?
Yes, sir.
What is that? Okay, do you know paracetamol, isn't it? Paracetamol, you know, you have read in second semester, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
What paracetamol, if the body temperature is more, what paracetamol will do? That means in fever, when body temperature rise, paracetamol, what does it do?
Sir, it helps to lower the temperature.
Lower the temperature, very good. If someone, a person having normal body temperature, if paracetamol is taken, what will happen? Will the temperature decrease?
No, sir.
Huh?
No, sir.
Yes, very good. So that is why what we say is paracetamol, okay, doesn't decrease the temperature below normal. If the temperature is increased, it will lower and make it to the normal, but doesn't decrease, isn't it? So it is used in fever. Similarly, what you have to understand is metformin. If the blood glucose level is higher, metformin will make it to the normal. But if someone blood glucose level is normal, and if you give metformin, it doesn't decrease the blood sugar level. That means it doesn't cause hypoglycemia. Always euglycemic, okay, normal glycemic. So no hypoglycemia even in overdose. Okay, metformin generally we can give up to 2 gram of metformin per day in a person without any much more side effect. What we say 2 gram is the tolerated dose of metformin. Okay, even more than 2 gram or even 3-4 gram, you won't get hypoglycemia. So it is euglycemic drug. So that is why metformin never cause hypoglycemia. So it is an anti-diabetic drug. It decreases the blood glucose level and make it normal, but it cannot decrease less than the normal. Okay, so metformin, very peculiarity about the metformin is that mechanism. How does it do? Mechanism of action of metformin. Okay, number one, first and foremost thing you have to remember is it doesn't act on beta cell of pancreas. Okay, it doesn't increase the insulin secretion. It doesn't do. It is not an insulin secretagogue. Okay, it doesn't increase the insulin secretion. So then how does it act? The mechanism of action is very complex, and there is peripheral action. And for this action, if there is some residual insulin, the action will be very good. Okay, very good in presence. There should be minor presence of the insulin. If there is insulin, then the action is good. Now what does it do is it inhibits hepatic glucose output. That means glucose production in the liver is inhibited. That means gluconeogenesis, the formation of glucose from non-carbohydrate source, is inhibited. So insulin production in the body is reduced. Okay. It enhances insulin-mediated glucose uptake and disposal in skeletal muscle and fat. So now see what happens. Glucose, in presence of GLUT transporter, it enters into the cell. Okay. So what does it do is that facilitation. Okay, the insulin which mediates that is being facilitated. So in body, the production of glucose will be less, and whatever the glucose is there in the blood will enter into the skeletal muscles and other fat tissue. So peripheral utilization or entry of glucose from blood into the tissue will be more. So blood glucose level will decrease. It inhibits intestinal glucose absorption. So glucose which is absorbed from the intestine is also inhibited, and it promotes peripheral glucose utilization through anaerobic glycolysis. Okay. So these are the important mechanism. Okay, how metformin act, and metformin doesn't increase insulin secretion. Okay, one thing you have to know. So what does it do? It decrease the production of it increase the uptake of glucose. Okay, by the body, and it inhibit the absorption of glucose from the intestine. So that is how the metformin act. Okay, understood?
Yes.
Okay. Pharmacokinetics, it is neither bound with plasma protein nor metabolized, excreted unchanged in urine. Okay, T half 1.5 to 3 hours, impair glucose metabolism of lactic acidosis. Now, in giving metformin, what you have to consider more is the kidney function. Okay, because this metformin is not metabolized, it is excreted unchanged in urine. Okay, from urine it is excreted. If kidney is not working properly, what will happen to the metformin concentration in the body?
Increases.
Sorry? Isika. Isika, are you there? Absent? Susan? Okay, Isika, you have come. Yes. What will happen if you use metformin in kidney failure patient, or the person whose kidney is not working properly? Yes? What will happen? Excreted, the metformin is excreted unchanged in urine, and if kidney is not excreting metformin, what will happen? Is it a difficult question? Can anyone answer?
Increases.
Increases metformin concentration. Okay, so that is why metformin is very good drug. Okay, it doesn't cause hypoglycemia. But before using metformin, one has to ensure the kidney function. Okay, if kidney is working, metformin is good drug. If it is not, then you have to think of that. Okay, so that is one very important clinical aspect you have to know. Next is it impair hepatic metabolism of lactic acidosis. Okay, and I think in adverse effect, let us see, then I will try to explain more. Adverse effect, it is frequent. Adverse effect are frequent, but less serious, very less serious. So you don't have to worry about the metformin. So side effects are not much more. One is anorexia. Okay, the appetite will be lost. The patient will not feel hunger. Okay, so that is good for a say obese patient. It will help to lose the weight, isn't it? Okay, and it also causes sometimes diarrhea, nausea, abdominal pain, and these all are dose related. That means when you use higher dose, there will be more these side effects, and when you decrease it, the side effect will decrease. And these all side effects are transient. It remains for short period of time. After when you continue this the side effect will be lost. Okay, so that is why you don't have to worry much more. And even these side effects you can minimize by taking this drug after meal. Okay, so this could be minimized with reducing the dose and okay, and taking after the meal. Got it? This is something very important, clinically important point that you have to aware or give to the patient while prescribing metformin. Lactic acidosis, okay, this is very important, but it is a rare side effect. Like before this metformin, there was one drug known as penformin. Okay, penformin, which was used, but now it has been banned due to lactic acidosis. It was more common with penformin, but till now metformin, we don't have much more this lactic acidosis syndrome. But okay, it is it could be seen in patient with renal, hepatic disease, and chronic alcoholic and pulmonary disease, heart failure. So that is why try to this when you are using metformin, okay, take precautions or try to avoid in these patients. Otherwise, in other cases, in the patient with proper renal and hepatic function, no alcoholic, you can use as one of the safest anti-diabetic drug. So metformin is very good drug, but it has to be avoided in kidney failure patient, okay, in alcoholics, in pulmonary disease. Why it has to be avoided? Because it may cause lactic acidosis. Okay, got it? This is very important point. And it should be used cautiously in dehydrated patient. Okay, cautiously. Because there will be electrolyte imbalance, and again there could be the lactic acidosis. So that is why the diabetic patient on metformin, the patient suffer from diarrhea or vomiting, severe diarrhea and vomiting. If there is dehydration, you have to withhold this drug. You have to stop this drug. Okay. And on long-term use, it may interfere vitamin B12 absorption and may cause vitamin B12 deficiency. That is why you have to supplement vitamin B12 in diabetic patient, especially the patient who are on metformin. Okay. So today we will stop here. Before stopping, let me ask some of you, the Ashutosh Jha.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Metformin, what are the precautions that you have to observe while prescribing metformin?
Sir, it should not be given in hepatic or renal
Be
disease
loud.
patient.
Be loud.
It should not be given in hepatic or renal disease patient.
Yes.
Because if overdose occurs, then there is high chance of lactic acidosis.
No, overdose. In those patients, there is a chance of lactic acidosis. So that is why that is fatal, rare but fatal, and that is why in those patients it has to be avoided. Very good. The other.
And then there are general side effects like anorexia and diarrhea and vomiting. And so if these have to be considered, these are mild